put on reporting. Writing is a very important issue. A lot of people have trouble with it. Brendan offered to use his post as a sample, and I'll do that. I'll send something around about that. I'll have your things graded. I kind of got a little mixed up. I thought I was going to grade them yesterday, but then I realized with the other class that I had said they didn't have to hand it in till tomorrow night. I mean, till yesterday evening. So I'll get those to you probably later today. I've done most of them already. And there's, your writing isn't terrible, but it could definitely be improved. I know there are a lot of ESL students, and that's a complicating factor. It's hard to learn English as a second language. It's always an issue, but there's a lot of stuff we can learn, and the more we learn, the better. You want to straighten up your grammatical writing as much as possible. I was telling the other class that I went to the One Stop Career Workshop taught by Andre Fontenelle last Sunday, and he showed a sample resume, and it was filled with spelling and grammatical errors. And you're gonna, if you hand a prospective employer something like that, you're gonna blow your opportunity. So you got to be really careful when you write a job letter that it's in correct English. And there's a little leeway. Some of the things I might talk about are a little more refined than the employers know about, but on the whole, no. They care about that. A lot of them. I'm not saying all, but can you get a job in corporate America without the writing? Probably, but it's going to hold you back. And a lot of them they'll say, I've heard employers say that they won't interview people if their writing isn't good. So, it's something you want to work on. And, I know from my own education, I didn't really have it in school. And I had a little, and when I went into the workplace, I fancied myself a decent writer, but they made me learn. And the writing in corporate America is better than it is in college. So I'm saying you don't get a lot of it. So it's something you got to focus on. I'm gonna give you some overview today about that. And I know it's a little bit boring, but sometimes things that are important are boring. I mean, when you go to see a doctor and they tell you what kind of drug you need to get better. I mean, learning that was probably boring, but you better hope they were bored, when they do that, and basically it's the same thing with writing, and I've had colleagues who were completely unaware. I mean, I've been through corporate America, I could have stayed. I was already promoted to middle management, or in the process of being promoted to middle. I was in lower management. I was getting at least one, maybe two promotions. And I understood what, I experienced what it's like. And, there's a lot of premium put on image, and part of that is your writing. So, and that's not the only reason. I'm not saying it's purely due to image. It's also due to that it's really important when you negotiate a contract, say, that the terms of the contract be clear. And if an accountant is giving information to a client about how to account for a certain transaction or how to handle something from a tax standpoint, it's got to be really clear to both parties what you're actually talking about. And so, a slight mistake can mean a lot of money. I once talked to this famous investor named Ken Pasternak, who developed one of the biggest office buildings in Jersey City. And he told me that when he put the contract together for that project, there was a group of people. Jared Kushner was involved and a lot of other people. And when they put the contract together, the whole thing, was 1,000 pages long. So, and part of the reason it was so long was that they had to specify all the details, every little thing that the builder is going to do, and who's responsible for what, and what kind of wood they were going to use, and the finishing, and what kind of pipes they're going to use, and on and detail after detail about every element of the construction. And all this had to be specified, otherwise they would get into lawsuits. And to do that kind of contract, you have to be like incredibly clear in your writing. And that's why the lawyers, when I dealt with the corporate lawyers, they by far had the best writing of the different types of people I've dealt with through the years. The academics are low, relatively little clarity, and not that good writers on the whole. So that's why you're not going to get it usually here, but you need it. And so, I once had a student come to me and say she had a job with Morgan Guarantee. I guess they call it now JP Morgan. When I was a kid, it was Morgan Guarantee. Now they call it JP Morgan. And she told me she was the only CUNY person. She said not only that, she said she was the only non-Ivy League person. Everyone else in the department had gone to Harvard, Princeton, Yale, whatever. And they told her as part of her performance review that she needed to improve her writing. They told her that. And she came to me and said, I went to the English department and they didn't help me. I took an English class and they didn't correct the writing. And, I've spoken to them and they told me they don't correct the writing unless you take a class in composition. They don't correct the writing. So you're not going to get a lot of what you need as far as writing goes from the program. So, you got to figure out how to do it on your own. And I did on my own. I mean, I'm not saying it's so surprising. I had some writing, but, not a lot. And, I even took some creative writing. I actually took a course in creative writing. And of course, they don't talk about actual grammatical mechanics and stuff like that. But that's more important. I mean, for business, you don't need to be creative. You need to be clear. This thing, we're going to teach creativity. It's like, you don't need that. It's ridiculous. I'm not saying that creativity isn't important, but in writing, you're not going to do creative writing. You want to be creative about your business concepts, not about how your writing style or like coming up with a fictional character or something. That's irrelevant. But like being a clear writer, that's, getting your message across, or being, winning over customers by giving a clear advertisement or something, that's really important. And pretty much all aspects of business involve that. Now, it's going to be more important if you're, the bigger the business, and if, people have said to me, oh, I'm going to be a computer programmer, I'm going to be an accountant, I don't need this. It's ridiculous. Of course you need it. If you're going to be a computer programmer, I mean, if all you're going to do is secretarial work and like type all day long, or all you're going to do is, coding, then you don't need it. But if you want to move up and be some kind of manager, you're going to have to write memos, and probably even in the rank and file level you do. So, your marketability is heavily affected by your writing style, even if what you want to do is primarily quantitative. So, that doesn't change a thing. And, when I was in business, I worked with accountants a lot. And the ones who made all the money were the ones that won over the clients. They're the ones that gave the presentations to the clients and then got the clients, and those are the ones that got promoted. It's like in law, the rainmaker is the one that gets promoted, and that depends on your communication skills. So basically, and that goes back to when you're hired, you need to have good communication skills. So I told the other class too. I mean, if you need help with a informational interview letter or a resume or something, I'll be glad to help you. But it doesn't solve the problem in the long run, because you're going to have to do it over and over again. And I once had a student, I'd give this kind of talk to her. She came to me privately, and she told me she was a manager at Starbucks. So, she told me she supervised she was a regional manager. So she supervised like multiple stores, and she had a lot of trouble framing her memos. And she told me she would come to the writing center at Brooklyn College to get help in writing a memo because she had never mastered it herself. And of course, you can't do that forever. So basically, the time to learn it is now. Now, how do you do that? I'm going to go over some of it, but I think the main issue is you have to teach yourself. I can't do it for you. I can point you where to look, and and of course, I already mentioned books like Elements of Style by Strunk and White, and there are a lot of really fine grammar books out there, and you can find a bunch. Of course, for ESL students, it's a lot different. It's harder, and that goes without saying. It's a lot tougher to learn a new language when you're an adult. But the thing is, you can improve anyway. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to become perfect. I can't really help you, but with a lot of it. But what I can help you do is at least get a picture of where to improve your mechanics. And I'm going to go over that today. Those of you who are English first students, I didn't have a lot of this. I mean, I was majoring in stuff that by right should have helped me with my writing. And when I went to the corporate world, they said, "Oh, you got to learn writing." So I did. I did. We worked on it a lot, and a lot of what I did, and when I was at both J&J and International Nickel, was they corrected my writing. I spent a lot of time on it. So, and I'm not saying I became a great writer. If I knew then what I've taught myself now, I would have I would have taught them. But at this point, it's different for me than it was then. And I had to learn in the real world. And I've had colleagues say, "Oh, well, writing doesn't really matter in the real world," but they never worked in the real world, so they don't know. Just to give you another anecdote about this to try to motivate you to think about it. My late wife's father was a highly successful business executive. He founded a corporation that's publicly listed and is thriving now. His nephew, my wife's cousin, runs it, and my late wife's cousin, and they're doing great. And basically, when he was alive, I sent him the work that one of my former students had done at Citigroup about making stock recommendations. And it was written in dismal English. And, he took one look at it and he said, I'm not going to listen to what this guy says. He can't even write a sentence, so this alone, kind of tells you what the attitude of people in that kind of position think. So it's something you want to be aware of. And when you look for a job, another story, I once had a group here. I was trying to start a group called
students in free enterprise. It's called an Actus now, and it was like the students like network with companies and give presentations, and there's a competition. And one of my students, who I'm still in touch with a little, slightly, wrote to uh, uh, Aflac, the insurance company. Remember, they had the ads with the duck, and he invited them to come on campus, and they said yes. And then when he wrote them, some information, they got back to him. They said, we saw what your writing is like in that email, and we're not going to come because a campus that lets you write like this is not one we want to visit. Okay, that actually happened. I didn't make that up. So basically, that's when I started to get more interest. It was about 18 years ago, and I started to get a little more interested 19 years ago in teaching stuff about writing. I normally wouldn't have thought of it as what my job was, but after some of these incidents, I did start to focus on it, and I taught for a while the writing intensive class, and that's I think it's called 4200W, if I recall, and uh, they make you write in the writing intensive class. I think you'll all have to do this, a 15-page paper. But my problem with that class was that a 15-page paper is too long for the professor to correct your writing. And by the time you take that class, you're past the point where you have time to really improve the mechanics of it. And I started to try to go over the mechanics of it with them. I taught the class for a few years, and I found that it was not possible in the way the idea of a 15-page paper to teach the mechanics of writing. So I would get 15 pages of bad writing and from the students, and it doesn't really help. I know they say the more you write, the better you become as a writer, but just throwing a 15-page paper at someone and then expecting them to learn writing by writing 15 pages is nonsense. I don't really, I'm not going to rant about it. I just think it's ridiculous as an educational approach. So I thought a lot about how to do it, and I have some techniques to do it, but with 140 students, it's difficult. So basically, I'm going to go over a little bit today and bore you a little with it. But the thing is, if you don't learn it on your own, you're not going to learn it. And so, what I recommend is that you get a hold of Elements of Style by Strunk and White, or another grammar book. And as I say, there's lots of them out there. I'm sure there's a lot of good ones. And go through it. You spend a half hour a day, a few days a week, and in a year or two, you'll be a master. You'll know as much as I do. That's exactly how I learned it. So, I learned it by correcting what the students do, basically. Not that I had no idea, but I had to review it and master it. And that took several years. I did it, so you can do it too. I mean, if I could do it, you could do it. So anyway, we'll get to that. But before we do that, we're going to do the Smile Factory at Disney. And first, I'll take attendance. Farhad.
I'm here.
Hello, Farhad. Ahmed Alcor.
I'm here.
Hello. Hold it. Mohammed Afi.
Here.
Hello. Jenna Bell.
I'm here.
Hello. Joseph Catanzaro. Joseph. Jiamin Chen.
Here.
Hello. Janine Cola.
I'm here.
Hello.
Kermi A. Cyrus.
It's Kermaya, Professor.
Sorry.
Good morning.
Gotcha. David,
Hi, Professor. I'm here.
good morning. Marimar Garcia. Marimar Garcia. Okay. Monica,
Here.
hello.
Hello.
Alexia Harrigan.
I'm here.
Hello. Kenny Jiang.
Here.
Hello. Yusuf Kahan.
Hey, Professor. I'm here.
Georgie Kareem
Here.
Bushvili. Hello.
Here.
Summer Lamb.
Here.
Hello. Hangjian Lin.
Here.
Hello. Hamdi.
Here.
Okay. Famida Petwari. Famida.
Yes. Hi.
Hi, how you doing? Ludley.
Good. Here.
Hello, Ludley. Emmanuel Plamakis.
Here.
Hello. Raquel. Jishan Ruan.
Hi, Professor. I'm here.
Brendan.
Hi, Professor. I'm here. Morning.
Morning. Stacy.
I'm here. Good morning.
Morning, Stacy. Hold it. I missed somebody. Aaliyah.
Good morning, Professor. I'm here.
Hello. Denasia.
Here.
Jack.
Here.
Hello. Yixuan. Zhang.
I'm here, Professor.
Hello. Yayin Zhang. I missed
Here.
it. Hello. Matthew.
Here, Professor.
Hello. Taryn.
Hi, here.
Hello. Christian.
Right here. Good morning.
Good morning. Janaya.
Here, Professor.
Good morning. Alexander. Hello, Alexander. Jack.
Here, Professor.
Hello, sir. Okay, I'm going to call the names of the people who did not answer.
Professor Raquel is here.
Okay. Joseph said yes. Is Jiamin here?
I'm here.
Okay. How about Jenna? Jenna Bell?
Yeah, I said I was here.
Okay. Marimar Garcia. Marimar. Raquel Porteous. Oh, I have Raquel.
I'm here.
Yes, you
I'm
said-
here, Professor.
Gotcha. Okay, so we got almost everybody. The one I didn't get, Monica Garcia, I guess isn't here. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Disney. So what did you guys think of, who can summarize the case for me a little? Denasia.
Denasia speaking.
Can you summarize the case?
Summarize the case.
The Disney case.
Oh. Sure. Okay, so from what I read, I personally would never work at Disney.
Why not?
Because it just seems like, I mean, me personally, I would say I am a upbeat person, but having to be like that 24/7, and the fact that the pay isn't even worth, to me, I don't think it's worth it. I don't think I could be able to do it, but okay, so
Gotcha.
the case was
No,
basically
I'm with
about,
you. I don't think I'd like it either. Why do people work there then?
from my understanding, I got, because they're able to, like, I guess, be around other people that are happy, and they're able, I feel like they feel like they have opportunity. I would say meeting other people, like,
Yeah, it's
being,
social. Yeah.
yeah, it's like more of
Work
a
social.
social thing. It's not, no real actual benefits, honestly.
Yeah. Maybe if you want to work in entertainment, it's kind of like, well, I played this role, as Mickey Mouse or something, maybe.
Yeah, I guess, but I still don't think it's worth it,
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree.
for
Well,
sure.
who else wants to, how about Janine? What else would you say about the case?
Hi, Professor. It's Raquel. The one thing that stood out for me is how the culture almost could create imposter syndrome because they're targeting almost like a type, right? Or even if you're not that type, once you get there, you transform to fit into the environment. So that's
Mhm.
one thing that stood out for me.
And what do you think that does to people psychologically?
I think it does create mental personalities. Like it does create, it's a mental health issue. It creates personalities, and as the other person said earlier, it's not worth it because even though they're working at Disney, there was no guarantee that even if they wanted to be a star, that the pathway will take them there. Like there was just
Oh
no
no,
guarantee
no.
at
Kind of
all.
like a
So
summer. Yeah, it was like a
yeah.
summer job or something like that. Yeah.
So to answer your question in short, imposter syndrome can create mental health issues, and it also steers a person further away from their goals if they had any, because they're always trying to fit into whatever space they're in. So they're not realizing who they truly are.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Yeah. So maybe it makes people a little nutty. That I believe. What else? So would you call, how would you characterize the culture of Disney? Let someone else go.
Toxic.
Toxic?
Yep.
Why is that?
It's almost like a fake. It's like a fake world that they're living in. It's uh, it's just like a behind the curtain. There's so much other things going on that
Uh-huh.
is, not visible to the average, visitor that's coming in. You're playing a part that, you might not enjoy playing. And yeah, there is some benefits. Like you can, you have the, having being able to say I worked at Disney on your resume if you're into, if you're into acting or whatever the case may be. Yeah, there might be some level of, opportunity for professional growth, but is it worth it at the end when you're like miserable? I don't think so.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Is there anyone in the class who would be interested in working there after they've read the case study? Or everyone agrees with Yusuf and Raquel that
I think you can still try to work there because it's what you bring to the table that can either change your trajectory at a company. While that may be the standard, but I think it's still a company that has a good reputation. I mean, if we didn't read that case study, we wouldn't really understand like what really goes on. I mean, it's a brand. So you can use the brand too if you want to for 6 months on your resume and
Yeah.
move on.
What about, let's say you did that work for a year, you did well, and then you moved on, you said, okay, well, I have to focus on school, so I'm going to resign. Then like a couple of years later, you applied for a job in the corporate office of Disney. And you said, well, I've worked here in the past. I'm interested in moving into corporate finance. I have some experience in the park. Do you think that might be a selling tool?
I believe you have an opportunity to talk to higher management there using, the entry level role as, of course, in this case, working at the theme park. But I think that'll be up to the person and themselves, how often do they network or how often do they communicate to the other leaderships on the theme park to be able to be recognized,
Yeah.
aside from being, a ticket concession, or even those who worked in the food sector of the park, be able to stand out. And then, of course, most of these, maybe some of them have some knowledge of whether it's school or their own personal interests that they can talk about. I think using that opportunity to leverage out definitely will be helpful, and the opportunity is there. But of course, that's up to the individual themselves to be like, okay, I want to join Disney. This may be where I start, but where do I want to go after? There's a lot of individuals who end up staying in the same role, maybe not because of the pay wage or because they like it, but it's something that they found. They're flexible with their lifestyle, or maybe they have the week or a day or two off that it's really necessary for their part. So I think it's definitely opportunity there.
You're absolutely right about that. I would say there's always a possibility for what you might call like moonlighting, like if you're working at a place, somehow networking within the place, you probably wouldn't have any hope of getting promoted to anything from that type of job. It's a dead end sort of thing. But what you might have an opportunity to do is if you can find a way to meet people in the company after hours and network with them, you could, knowing that you've already worked for them and that you've had performance appraisals and stuff like that, they might be more open to hiring you for other roles. So it could potentially be a basis for networking opportunity, but certainly not, Raquel is right that, as far as, getting promoted directly, it's forget it, it's not, it's just not in the cards. So, yeah, so I think in a way, I think it's a fascinating case study and it depicts the culture in a certain way. I think things like that, though, tend to be a little bit too focused on the context and not enough on like what you could do to transform your reality. And that's always going to be not there. It's going to be if you're working there and then you put on a suit and tie and you go to a restaurant near the corporate headquarters and you talk to people and that's how you might meet people who could potentially build on your experience. So in other words, informational interviewing, something like that. But yeah, in general, I would say, that type of job isn't going to do much for you. It's nice. It's probably nice to tell people I once worked at Disney and, have that on your resume, but, uh, any kind of direct promotion from there is highly unlikely. So that's all clear. And why then do people work there? Why do you think people want to work at Disney? At the theme park? Summer?
Yes,
Why do people want to work there?
I think it's really because of its Disney being so well known and having that on your resume, it would be impressive.
Yeah, in
Just
part.
being able to say that, hey, I work at Disney or I used to work at Disney is, it's like, wow, what did you do? Like it prompts so many questions. It's an intriguing place. Well, versus
Yeah,
working at a small company, people are gonna
true,
be like, okay, that's cool.
true. Yeah, I guess for the rest of your life, you can tell people, oh, I was once Snow White or something, or I once worked at Disney in the concessions and
I
whatever.
think a lot of it has to do with nostalgia as well. Like you grow up with Disney. If you grow up with Disney and you're watching Disney, you might fantasize about one day, when you're older, playing Snow White, and when you're older, like what I mean. It's just like there is always that element of nostalgia that plays into the the minds of growing individuals.
That's cool. Yeah. Uh-huh. And so that they're having fun with it. It's also, I, I think a lot of people at that age are interested in partying. I'm sure a few of you are, and you won't admit to it to me, but after school you are. And so basically, it's a great context. It's basically a party thing. They work a few hours and then they, have fun with their colleagues, and so it's kind of like a fun way to spend the summer. It's kind of like being a camp counselor or something like that. Sort of a social kind of thing, and they get some rewards that way, and not money, but having fun and so on. So I think that's a lot to it. You can see in there, I mean, you can see in there how sophisticated Disney is in terms of its control methods. I mean, they're using organizational culture, but they're also using surveillance and supervision and pretty much everything they can think of to make sure that everything is executed, all the roles are played properly, that the customers are treated, in the way they predict they should be treated, and everything runs smoothly and nobody's disappointed. And this requires a great deal of control. And that's what they're using. And really, I think the emotional stress that these people are put under there is significant. It's not as damaging as the situation in 12 o'clock high, which requires far greater ability to handle stress and unfortunate circumstances. But at the same time, there is a great deal of stress, and I think in a way the Disney people do it better. They've got their culture better shaped. The problem in 12 o'clock high is that they really didn't understand what they were doing yet. They didn't have a culture. They were trying to create a culture. So in a way, they're like Walt Disney at age, when he first invented Mickey Mouse or what have you, that, the he still didn't really know what his organization was going to be. And it took a long time for them to shape it. I'm sure I've never really studied the history of Disney. I was once up there. I once actually, when I was a UCLA MBA student, we visited as a group. They gave us a 1 day seminar there. So I saw what the culture was like at the corporate office, and it very, very strong culture, very conformist, and very agreeable outer. They're like that in the corporate office too. It's like everybody's very friendly, and they're a first name company. They only use first names, and everyone's got to be polite and pleasant. Everybody's happy, and if you don't fit in like that, you're not going to survive there. I could have never worked there. I'm not like that. So I think that kind of thing, it does put a huge burden on people, on their emotion. And so this is really the direction that work is going in.
that where the emotional element is becoming more and more what the value added is from labor, and the technology. Now a few people in the other class use Chat GPT. I could tell from the answers. So I'm not saying not to do it, but if you do it, you should mention that you did it, allude to it, rather than just put it forward like as your answer. So, it's not a bad thing to use Chat GPT, but I think you should disclose that you're using it when you post. The thing is, I mean, the thing about Chat GPT, it can give a very intelligent sounding answer, but it may not be the answer that you can get after you've read Van Maanen, or however you pronounce his name. So basically, it's a good general thing from somebody who, from, just a broad perspective, and it picks certain things that its programming teaches it, but it may not have really studied the details of Van Maanen or 12 o'clock high. And I'm sure over time, if you target the question properly, it's gonna be able to actually do the research for you. Well, of course, if you're doing that, then the question is, what value are you adding? And I think that's a very important question, because if you're not adding value now, how are you going to add value in the workplace? And so if you're not like developing skills that have value at this point, how are you going to develop skills? The human touch, Brendan said, yeah, and you're right. I think that's a big part of it. And we've known this for a long time. This goes back to that book, Megatrends, John Nesbitt's Megatrends back in the 80s, that, people still use that phrase, high tech means high touch. And I think that's undoubtedly true. And another thing is, like, I think the creativity factor is just not duplicable to the degree that we can do it. And so you need to think about that, and I think one thing you can do is use ChatGPT as an element in your answer, but then you're like doing a meta-analysis that includes ChatGPT along with other sources, and you can determine where it gets it right and where it gets it wrong. I would be wary of saying, okay, I'm going to let ChatGPT do my work for me. And I'll tell you why. It's fairly easy for anyone else to do it too. It's just as easy as it is for you to do it. So, the ones in this class, actually, I didn't detect as much as in the other class. There were a couple of people. I didn't see too much of that in this class, although, and if you're relying on it to help with your English, that's okay too. I mean, but the danger is that you're going to come up with answers that are, going to be detected as from ChatGPT, and then people will say, well, do I really need this guy? That's the thing I would be worried about there. So I mean, ChatGPT is new to everyone. I'm not going to be critical of people for using it. And we're all kind of grappling with how to use it. I don't think we understand that yet. And the schools are grappling. At some places they consider it plagiarism. And I would be very wary of just using it, because, somebody could say, well, they're just, they're dishonest. They're just taking stuff from ChatGPT and pretending it's theirs. And you don't want to do that. You don't want people to think that. I pulled stuff like that in my own career once or twice, and it's stupid. I did some stupid things myself, and you don't want to do stuff like that. So it's a lot to think about. And but basically, I think, if you compare the two, they both involve emotional labor. I think, of course, what's required of 12 o'clock high is a lot different. But as Raquel said, I mean, even Disney can lead to mental illness. I think there's truth to that. When I worked for J&J, I had access to all the personnel records, so I would see a lot of stuff that that's an exaggeration. I didn't really have access to all the personnel records, but I did have access to a lot of stuff that was confidential. And one of the things I saw was that there was this guy who had been a vice president of one of the organizations that they own. They basically control corporations. They call it a family of companies, or they used to call it that. And it's like a bunch of separate companies that all do different things that are all controlled by corporate. And this is like the decentralized form of organization that we'll talk about towards the end of the semester. And, so they call it operating company, and a lot of places they'll call it division or operating company. Each operating company has its own management. And at one point they fired the VP, I think it was the marketing VP of one of the operating companies, and, for anyone, it would be a tragedy. But this guy committed suicide because he had been fired. And, when I read the records of it and the story, I said to myself, God, how could somebody like take this place so seriously that they would kill themselves over losing their job here? I didn't even like it there. I would have been happy to, get severance pay and get out of there. I didn't even care. But and the thing is, these companies do mess with your mind. They do. And something like Disney will, it'll change you a lot. So basically it's a kind of brainwashing, and these companies, the ones that do it the most are the ones with the strongest cultures, the corporate cultures. And the Disney culture is very powerful. I would say the 9/18th had a less of a culture. They hadn't really arrived at their culture yet. They were just starting the Air Force at that point. They were almost like entrepreneurs. They were like Disney in its infancy. And so they were like, trying to create a culture and this thing, a maximum effort. It really was not the way to do it. And, they were experimenting too. I mean, that's how organizations and people learn, is by trying ideas and seeing what happens. And of course, in the military, we'll see this, when we watch the interview with Robert McNamara, The Fog of War. This phrase, the fog of war, I mean, it means that we often don't know what we're doing in war. And the same is true in any organization. In organizational analysis, we call it bounded rationality, that rationality is limited. And, a lot of what organizations do is try to cope with the uncertainty and lack of clarity in the world. And, part of that is going to be learning. And so how do we handle stress management? And that's part of the fog of war, really. I'm not saying it's the worst part, because, of course, really what a lot of it is that people inadvertently kill people on their own side, and this is, and McNamara talks about that. And, but his real thing is, of course, that the Vietnam War was a complete disaster due to his own stupidity. But we'll get to that another time. Anyway, I said I was going to talk about writing, and I did in the other class. So we didn't have as interesting a conversation as in this class for some reason. From now on, I'm going to call on people more. I haven't done that with Zoom. I have to learn that, as I'm learning too. So basically, let's talk a little bit about grammar. And Brendan, I didn't look at your thing yet, but I will, and I'll share. But there are a few things that mistakes that a lot of people make, and I think I've mentioned a couple already. One is matching number. So you always want to make sure that if you have a singular noun, you don't have a plural verb, and vice versa. So the boy with many friends is running. Okay, you don't say the boy with many friends are running. Okay, it's true that friends is plural, but this is a prepositional phrase that modifies boy. So basically, the number of the verb should match the subject. Now, this sentence contains the word running. Okay, and running is a confusing form that I want to talk about for a few minutes. I did in the other class too, and that's called a verbal. Okay, and a lot of people don't understand those. Okay, now a verbal is a verb turned into another form of speech. And there are three of them. Infinitives, gerunds, and participles, and we'll talk about them. What are the parts of speech? You should know this, but in case you don't, it's okay. Nouns refer to things or people. All right, so the names. So it could be like the computer, the bottle. You have a water bottle here. You can see it. So the bottle is a noun. The table, the screen, whatever. So that they refer to people or things. So if you refer to the actual first and last name of someone, that's called a proper noun, basically, or a proper name. And basically things like Professor Langbert or Yusuf Khan or Raquel Porteous or Summerlam, those are all proper names or proper nouns. And so basically those would also refer to people. Or you could say Brooklyn College is a proper name, okay, a proper noun is a proper noun. So those would all be nouns. Verbs are action words. Okay, so it'd be like to go, to run, to see, think. Okay, adjectives describe nouns. So it'd be the fat professor, the stupid politician, the joyous lake. All of those are adjectives: joyous, stupid, fat, smart, whatever. Okay. You could also have adverbs, another part of speech. So these are the parts of speech. And you could have adverbs. Adverbs describe verbs or adjectives or other adverbs. So now I tell people to use as few adverbs as possible. This is very important. In business writing, you want to be clear, and clarity means that you use as few words as possible. So you don't say something like the really big store. Okay, you could just say the big store. Okay, you avoid using vacuous adjectives that add little meaning. One term that a lot of people use to try to sound fancy is quite. Like this is like, you think of an English aristocrat or something, quite so old chap or something like that. But really, you don't need the word quite. It doesn't really mean anything. The store was quite big. In speaking, it's okay. You kind of use words like that as filler. But when you're writing, you want to get rid of any of that kind of garbage. So very, really, quite, entirely, awesome, extremely, those type of adverbs you want to get rid of. You usually want to minimize your use of adjectives and really minimize, there you go. Even more so, minimize your use of adverbs. Okay, but and that's an editorial that I think is worth mentioning. So basically, adverbs describe verbs or adjectives. And there's also joining words like prepositions, prepositions join nouns or pronouns to a sentence. So he went with him. Okay, with him is a prepositional adverbial phrase that modifies went. How did he go? He went with him. So it's a prepositional phrase, and it's prepositional because with is followed by the pronoun him. Okay, so prepositions are joining words. And the key to understanding prepositions is that they can't be followed by verbs. They should only be followed by nouns or pronouns. So at the store, he bought a cigar. Okay, so basically at the store is followed by the noun store, but you can't say at he bought a cigar. Okay, that makes no sense. Okay, at he bought a cigar. Nobody would think you're making any sense, because you can't have a verb that follows a pronoun. Now, of course, you could say something like at the cigar. That also doesn't make sense, even though it's a noun, but you could say at the cigar box. Okay, or at the cigar store or something like that. A noun follows a preposition. In contrast, verbs, the other type of joining word that's important is and there are a few other ones too, is a conjunction. A conjunction follows or precedes a verb. So you say, while he was at the cigar store, he bought candy. Okay, so basically this while is a subordinating conjunction that joins the clause he was at the cigar store to the main clause he bought candy. Okay, so that's a conjunction. And I talked already about coordinating conjunctions as well. So you could say he was at the cigar store and he bought candy. Okay, here and, which has other functions too. Here and is functioning as a coordinating conjunction because you're joining a second main clause to the sentence. Now, I already told you this, I'll say it again. When you write, you should limit your sentences to 15 words. Okay, now that's not really true. Let me take that back. Limit your sentences to 30 words. Now, it's okay if your sentence is 50 words. You gotta sit back and say, why is it too long? Okay, there may be a reason. You know, if you're writing a philosophy paper and it requires all kinds of qualifiers and some kind of academic, 50-word sentence might be appropriate. For most things in English, if you're writing more than 20, I mean in business, when I said English, I meant to say business. For most things in business, 15 to 20-word sentences should do the trick. So if you're writing 45-word sentences in your communication, it's way too long, and you're giving it, you don't want to irritate people who are potential clients, or you don't want to irritate people who are your bosses or something like that. So you want to be really clear and not be confusing. And so the way you do that is short sentences. All right. So if you're writing a 50-word sentence, there may be a reason for it, but in general, there isn't. So you want to limit your sentences to 30 words and mostly 15 to 20 words tops. Okay, tops meaning at the most. It's a slang term, but that's okay. So basically, now getting back to the verbals, that's what I started talking about. Let's say you have a sentence. Running is fun. Okay, you like to jog, or jogging is fun, whatever. So basically, this word running is functioning as a noun. Okay, and the reason it's functioning as a noun is it's the subject of the sentence. So a verb cannot be the subject of a sentence. And so why did this verb suddenly become a noun? And the reason is that it's a verb turned into a noun called a gerund. Okay, a gerund is a verb turned into a noun. Verb turned into a noun by adding ing. Okay, so for example, public speaking is scary. Okay, speaking is a gerund. Running every day gets tiring. Okay, listening to my professor is boring. Okay, you have two gerunds there, double gerund. You have listening is the subject. Oh no, that's not a gerund. The boring is a participle. So you're describing the listening with boring. Okay, and I haven't gotten to participles yet, but so you have a gerund, listening, the subject of the sentence, and boring, a participle, which is functioning as an adjective, and it describes listening. So gerunds are verbs turned into nouns by adding ing. Now, another kind of verbal is the infinitive. And infinitives are just the form to run, to smoke, as in smoking cigarettes, to dance, to sing, whatever. Okay, so these are all infinitives. Now, infinitives, in English, the infinitive generally takes the form to, followed by the simple infinitive form. And infinitives can be used as nouns, adjectives, or adverbs. There's the famous Shakespearean Hamlet thing, to be or not to be is the question. That is the question, or is the question. Okay, so to be here is functioning as a noun. To be is the question. Okay, to be is the subject of the sentence. You're saying that this is the predicate. You're equating to be with the question. Okay, I forget who it was to say, to err is human, to forgive. And here you could actually use a semicolon. I forget who said that, somebody. To forgive is divine. Okay, so again, the infinitives, to err is human, to err is the subject, to forgive is the subject, and so you're using the infinitive as a noun. You can also use infinitives as adverbs or adjectives. Trying to think of one. I'm gonna look it up on the web because I have trouble thinking of it using an infinitive as an adverb. Sorry about that. Someone just called me on my phone. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, God, I'm just not thinking of it. Example of infinitive as adverb. Okay. Easy enough. Okay, so Billy is ready to go. Okay, I don't know, I had so much trouble thinking of that. Billy is ready to go. Okay, to go modifies ready. All right, that's all there is to it. Uh he okay, so now infinitive as an adjective. Let's get another example. Infinitive as an adjective. Uh, um, okay, I just thought of one. Sorry to get like that. The boy is about to go. Okay, to go modifies boy, so the infinitive is functioning as an adjective. All right, so infinitives can function as nouns, can function as adverbs, and can function as adjectives. And then the final one is participles. Gerunds add ing. Gerunds add ing to form a noun, while participles add ing to form an adjective. So you could say running is fun. Running is a gerund that's functioning as a noun, or you could say the running boy is tired. Running is functioning as an adjective. And this is really hard in English because running can function as either an adjective, the running boy, or as a noun, the gerund, running is fun. Now, one last thing, and then I'll let you go. We're running out of time. I didn't spend as much time on this I would have liked to, is how do you handle the subject of a gerund? And this is an application of the possessive form in English. And a lot of people get this wrong. And it's very important. It's very important to try to master possessives. So basically, let's look at what possessives are, and then I'll get back to possessives and gerunds, and then we'll go. The possessive form is simply that you add an apostrophe when you want to indicate association or possession. So the story's ending. Ending here is a gerund, and the
the boys football. Okay, the building's front door. Okay, those are all possessives. The professor's exam. Okay, all of those are possessives. You're indicating possession by adding an apostrophe S. Now, one thing you never want to do, this is going to be a disaster if you do this in any kind of job-related job search, is to forget the apostrophe. So if you say something like the professor's exam and you leave out the apostrophe, or the reverse, if you say the boys ran to school, when you meant to use the plural, the boys ran to school. Okay, so here, to school is a prepositional phrase, modifying ran, it's adverbial, it's modifying ran. The subject of ran is plural, ran is a plural verb, so that's okay. But you want to make sure that you don't use an apostrophe when you're using a plural noun, and you do use an apostrophe when you're indicating possession. So the boys' school is far. Okay, so the school, sorry, that I meant to say school, not school. So the boys' school is far, just means that the school that's associated with the boy that the boy attends is far. Now, if you do a plural possessive, then the apostrophe goes after. Like if there are 3 boys, the boys' school is far. That's okay too if there are multiple boys. Okay, so you should always be careful of that. I know you mostly know it. I see often people get that wrong, and that's not a good thing. You don't want to make that mistake when you're looking for a job. Also, now I'll get back to this thing with the gerund, and I know you're not going to learn the verbals right off the bat. It takes a little bit of thinking. They're not that hard, but you need to spend a few minutes on it. However, there's one big issue I want you to be aware of. There are 2 ways to indicate possession. You could say the Disney culture, or you could say Disney's culture. Now, either of these is right. When you use it the first way, that's called an attributive noun. That the noun Disney is functioning as an adjective, and that's perfectly okay. And there's an increasing tendency for people to do that. So the trend is to not use the apostrophe S. However, there are times when using the attributive noun simply doesn't work. For instance, if you say the boy football, it doesn't sound like you know English, you're learning English. It's okay if you are, it's not a crime. I try to learn some other languages too, but that's not correct English. Anyone who speaks English would be jarred by that. However, so you have to use the possessive in certain contexts. So when you indicate possession, you will normally use apostrophe S, and you can often instead use an attributive noun. The question is this: when you have a participle modifying a noun, can you get confused? Can you get confused between a participle and a gerund? We're out of time, so I'm going to pick this up next time. I apologize for going over, and sorry about the mix-up with the URL. I'll try to be more careful, and otherwise, have a nice weekend, and I'll get your grades back to you soon. If you have a question, feel free to ask me after class.
Okay, have a good one.
You too.
Thank you, Professor. Great
Thanks,
class.
Professor.
The interaction
Thank
is
you.
really
Take care.
Professor, I just wanted to know if you marked me as present because I was here.
I think,
Jenna Bell.
yeah, I did mark you present.
Oh, okay,
But
thank
your
you.
voice was really, were you the one whose voice was like barely?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you anyway.
All right, thank you.